The chamber dome shimmered in the reflected light of a dying sun, its slow collapse rippling in amber waves across the energy-suspended skylights. Stained glass mosaics, depicting long-forgotten victories and mythical unifications, fractured the light into an unsettling kaleidoscope, casting blood-red and violet patterns across the polished obsidian floor. The great chamber of Senate Station Lysium, the ceremonial heart of the Galactic Empire, was less a parliament now than a mausoleum of obedience. The air was heavy with ozone and embalming salts, pumped deliberately to preserve the fragile decorum of its aging elite. Lysium hung in high orbit over the terminal star Velisa, its orbit decaying fractionally every year. A symbolic station above a star that could no longer sustain fusion, a metaphor, perhaps, but no one dared suggest it aloud. The senators arrived slowly, flanked by ceremonial aides and security drones, their movements choreographed by millennia of unbroken ritual. 42 species were represented, none native to their own planets anymore. Each wore the crest of imperial harmony on their chests, an interlocked triad of broken circles etched in white alloy. Each spoke the High Empire tongue, a lingua purity protocol derived from linguistic fractal compression. Efficient, sterile, void of metaphor. Senator Holt Riven did not wear the sigil. He wore a jacket lined with human leather, genetically grown, but still outlawed. A Terran affectation, the Empire whispered. His boots bore the grit of some unregulated world in the hollow reaches. His bearing, unmistakably martial, cracked the silence as he entered, each step a deliberate percussion. A quiet drumbeat. His eyes scanned the chamber not with deference, but with contempt. Few recognized the emotion, it had no translation in their cultural packets. His heart was slow and cold, but it beat with the weight of names he hadn't spoken aloud in years. He remembered the taste of ash in the wind above Brask, 5, the sound of the last human choir singing before the orbital sterilization. He had memorized this moment in his sleep, calculated every syllable, but now, at the edge of it, he felt the ancient edge of fear. Not for himself. For what would follow. Humanity had not held power in generations. The Concordant Compact relegated their species to cultural stewardship and population quotas, both of which had long since failed. Holt Riven was a relic, a procedural artifact, but he had requested the floor, and according to Senate Statute 72, written during the first expansion age, he could not be denied. He mounted the central pedestal. Microphones recalibrated. Photonic veils dimmed the ambient skylights, casting his face in an almost sacred glow. A hush fell. Ozer, seated high in the praetor's tier, leaned forward slightly. His fingers, inorganic and scarred with archaic military seals, hovered over a crystalline scroll of state permissions. Holt placed the speech node upon the pedestal. He did not activate it. Instead, he looked up at the chamber's apex, a mirrored dome depicting the Empire's founding charter, etched in burnished gold. Beneath it, 1,000 eyes waited. Expecting ritual. Expecting compliance. His voice came unfiltered. The modulation dampeners hissed as he overrode their default input protocols. Children, he said. The sound echoed unnaturally. Too raw. Across 100 translation cores, the word triggered recursive loops. The High Empire tongue had no direct equivalent for the term. The translators requested context. Emotional subtext. Holt gave them none. We were children when we arrived in this galaxy. When your ships pulled us from our oceans, when your psalms replaced our songs. When your creeds dismantled our languages. We were reshaped to fit your order. A low murmur passed through the chamber. Some of the elder species, especially those whose first contact with humanity had involved war, stirred slightly. The youngest among them, bred in post-war generations, simply tilted their heads in confusion. You gave us serenity. Sterility. You made our cities clean. Our ambitions correct. You took our seasons and called it alignment. You took our grief and called it mental calibration. And you called it peace. Praetor Van Ozer adjusted his seat. Though his synthetic limbs did not tire, his protocols were flagging deviation thresholds. The speech was non-compliant. Symbolic language. Intent drift. In violation of cultural coherent statutes. Peace, Holt continued, is not the absence of war. Peace is the lie you wrap around the silence of the broken. A visible twitch pulsed across Ozer's temple implants. He accessed Directive Sentinel Alpha emergency interjection protocols. A signal ran through the chamber, no audible sound, just a shift in the harmonic resonance, a vibration in the bones of those sensitive enough to feel it. Senator Riven, Ozer intoned, rising from his seat. His voice bore the iron-rod edge of imperial authority. This rhetoric deviates from sanctioned frameworks. You will desist or be redacted. But Holt was no longer speaking in High Empire tongue. The next words left his mouth with rhythmic cadence, syllables guttural and archaic. Terran old script. The chamber froze. Half the audience didn't understand what they were hearing. The other half remembered and went still. Old script was extinct. Not outlawed, extinct. The last sanctioned use of it had been during the reconciliation trials 2 centuries ago. Since then, no record, no utterance. The translation cores failed outright. They didn't just misrender, they shut down. Some flickered violently and rebooted. Others simply went dark, unable to parse syntax structure coded in recursive memory tones. Holt had timed every inflection. Deep beneath the chamber, a pulse moved through the underlayers of Lysium. Not a signal, but a pattern. Ancient, key to forgotten lattice frequencies. It didn't transmit. It awakened. Old Terran beacons, buried in lunar vaults and cometary cores, flared into existence. Dust-choked black boxes, presumed dead, connected. A Terran datastream rose in waveform layers across sectors of space, so dark they'd been mapped as null zones. The speech had been a trigger. The language a carrier. The Sedition Pulse had been launched. And in that instant, as Ozer stepped forward and the chamber guards deployed, Holt stepped back from the pedestal. He did not look up. His gaze was locked on the floor, on the obsidian reflecting his last words. From the ceiling, a panel slammed open. Cora Thorne dropped like a dagger. Her boots hit the floor with a concussive charge that silenced even the guard's stun lances. In one fluid motion, she drew a pulse shard from beneath her jacket and fired directly into the lead enforcer's neck. The second guard turned, but not in time, his helmet shattered under the kinetic crush of her left boot. A third raised his weapon, she swiveled and fired once, twice. Neural arc spidered across his skullcap. He dropped. Ozer vaulted down with unnatural speed, servo limbs whining under the sudden load. But Cora didn't engage. She threw a disruptor shell at his feet and dove for Holt. The shell burst midair, unleashing a cascade of anti-sensory fog, colorless, odorless, and violently disorienting to any who relied on visual processing. Ozer's sensors recoiled. Just long enough. Holt and Cora vanished into the western corridor. Behind them, the chamber erupted in crimson alarm. Emergency lockdowns began to trigger, but the ancient Terran protocols embedded in Lysium's foundation began working against them. Doors opened that hadn't budged in centuries. Systems overrode themselves. The station, for the first time in generations, disobeyed. They ran through the underlayers, once ceremonial catacombs, now largely ignored. Gold panels etched with every language the Empire had extinguished lined the walls. Holt glanced at them only once. A silent nod. Cora's breath was shallow and fast. Her lips moved before the words formed. "It's spreading," she muttered like a prayer. Then louder, "They won't be able to stop it." For the first time, fear crept into her voice. Not fear of death, but of what Holt had unleashed. "They'll try," Holt replied. "They'll sterilize entire sectors to keep it contained." Her eyes narrowed. "Then we better not be in one." For a moment, he looked at her, not as a co-conspirator, but as someone who had already paid a price for remembering. She had been there at the fall of Jerash III. He had read the tribunal records. What she did to survive. What she did to keep the last living archive hidden. Above them, Lysium's core authority structure faltered. Dozens of regional subnetworks, thought dormant, began broadcasting memory-encoded signals. Ships hidden in solar shadows stirred. Long deactivated AI routines started replaying ancient war doctrines. Across the known systems, deep in forgotten outposts, storage arrays flickered awake. The Sedition Pulse had done more than announce rebellion. It had reminded a galaxy what humanity used to be. And war, long denied, had finally remembered its name. Lysium's core reactor bled red light through the access corridors, casting long shadows against the walls as klaxons pulsed in waves. The station was no longer neutral. Its programming had fractured. Emergency protocols fought with subroutines awakened by the Sedition Pulse. In the upper layers, containment doors slammed shut. In the lower depths, sealed passageways opened themselves with a groan of metal fatigued by centuries of silence. The Empire's grip on the station was slipping. Praetor Van Ozer did not pursue immediately. He stood alone at the center of the Senate floor, the obsidian tiles still vibrating from Holt's speech. His internal process cycle had doubled. 17 tactical overlays rotated behind his artificial retina, each proposing a different method of suppression. But none accounted for what had happened. Terran old script. Broadcast at full spectrum. Activated across dormant systems. He stared at the broken pedestal and understood, for the first time in 3 centuries, that something had shifted beyond protocol. Beyond containment. He opened a private channel encrypted to the Empire's core emergency tier. Confirmed Directive 999. The reply was immediate. Cold. Mechanical. Directive confirmed. All Terran cultural zones to be purged. Containment priority, psychological infrastructure. Total kill order. A low hum built within Ozer's frame, part sound, part memory. He had once executed a planet-wide cleanse on Thassalon 8. It took 3.2 days. 17,000 memory breaches. That had been a controlled burn. This was a firestorm. Holt had rewritten the signal architecture. The activation was not digital, it was mnemonic. Ozer turned and walked toward the central dais, footsteps silent against the stone. A protocol sphere hovered to meet him, projecting the maps of every Terran-linked system in known space. A lattice of light. Planetary nodes. Forgotten beacons. Rogue memory cores. The Empire had spent centuries burying Terran identity under silence. Now the roots were breaking through. Begin suppression sequence in Sector 3712. Initiate silencing agents in all known human descendant enclaves. Prioritize archival erasure and neural lattice interdiction. The protocol sphere blinked once. Confirmed. Fleet deployment in progress. Psychological sterilization authorized. Specify first-tier deletions, Ozer said. Confirmed. Deletion of Terran music archives, sublanguage dialects with emotional nuance, ancestral naming conventions, tactile ritual memory patterns, and child imprinting stories. He nodded just once. Proceed. Holt and Cora moved in near darkness, lit only by flickering guide lights built into the old diplomatic crawlways. These shafts were never mapped in the public layers constructed in the early expansion era for silent movement between security sectors. Holt moved with familiarity, his palm brushing the wall every 10 meters to trigger analog bypasses. No network. No trace. The air down here smelled of lubricant and rotting insulation. Some doors hadn't opened in centuries. Biolum seals flickered uncertainly as they passed, trying to recognize codes last used when Terrans still held command seats. Cora followed behind him, silent until the hall widened into a small chamber, once a service node, now converted into a crude safe station. It smelled of rust and vacuum sealant. She keyed the lock and dropped her pack, glancing at Holt. I need to know where we're going. Holt didn't answer immediately. He stood at the far edge, running his fingers over a recessed panel etched with the Terran sigil of Perseid, a pre-Empire philosophy outlawed after the Brask fires. The metal was warm beneath his hand, though no energy flowed through it. You just gave them the war they've been waiting for, she said. Her voice was low, but the accusation burned. This wasn't just a broadcast. You triggered latent infrastructure. Fleet logic. Planetary nodes. You hardwired the past into the present. He looked at her. Not with defiance. With gravity. I reminded them who we are. She stepped forward. You don't get to say we. You weren't there when the sterilization started. You weren't the one digging memory cores out of civilian shelters. You didn't hold the last boy from Cordiva as his lungs failed because the air wouldn't remember how to hold oxygen. A silence followed. Long too long. Cora turned away and sat on the cold floor, jaw clenched. Holt spoke again, more quietly. There's a relay ship stored in Vault Sector 12. Legacy class. Untouched since the Concordant Accords were signed. That's under Pretor clearance. I wrote the override code 15 years ago. She stared at him. You've been planning this that long? I've been preparing. Not planning. The plan happened today. In the heights above them, Ozer moved through the command tiers like a phantom. The walls of the Senate ring were constructed from recycled alloys, stripped from battle cruisers that once defended the Terran frontier. A reminder. A warning. Ozer's fingertips brushed the cold metal now as if listening to the memory it still held. He paused before the main control throne. Inserted his core spike. The system resisted for 0.73 seconds. Then folded. Lygium is compromised. Prepare purge sectors 1 through 5. Jettison diplomatic quarters. Inhabitants are now classified as retention risks. A pause. Then issue planetary notices in encoded harmony script. Ensure no news of rebellion reaches the inner arcologies. Maintain imperial morale metrics. The throne responded with quiet approval. Lights shifted. Commands cascaded down. Outside the station, the first sterilizer drones began to deploy, small black pods with no markings, no IFF signals. Each one housed a memory scrub AI and a protein destabilizer array. They were not built to kill. They were built to erase. In the depths, Holt and Cora reached the access shaft for Vault 12. A vertical tunnel layered in frost and steam. The gravity inversion here had always been unstable, time itself ran slower in its base. Holt stepped in without pause. Cora lingered. The air tasted metallic. She reached out, brushing the wall, and felt a slow pulse, like something asleep beneath the surface. She swallowed. Feels like falling into a grave. Holt said nothing. They dropped. Gravity twisted, bent, then reasserted. The vault chamber opened like a lung, vast, circular, ribbed in dull metal and carbon-braced steel. It was silent but alive with old tension. Her ears popped. Her breath fogged. And in the center, cloaked in dust and semi-reactive shielding, rested the ship. It wasn't beautiful. It was brutal. Human design before compliance, angular, armored, and cruel in silhouette. Cora's breath caught. Not just from the cold. From memory. I've seen her before, she whispered. Orbiting Jerash before it fell. She survived, Holt said. You kept her offline. She remembers who we were. Holt approached the console. It was carved from matte obsidian, unlit, waiting. He typed in the activation phrase, in the absence of light, let memory reign. The ship stirred. Its hull plates shifted with a low groan. Lights emerged, not cold blue, but warm amber. Terran amber. Recognition. One by one, systems came alive. A holographic schematic rose above the console, flickering at first, then stable. Cora saw it then, a memory lattice embedded in the command structure. It wasn't just a ship. It was an archive. She's a ghost ship. She's a testament. Above them, the kill order spread across star systems. Worlds with Terran history went dark. Archives combusted. Civic nodes disintegrated into black fire. Families disappeared in corridors. Songs vanished from the mesh. Names lost their meaning in the digital memory of the Empire. Specifics were prioritized, funeral chants from Arvad Prime. Pre-imperial lullabies. Kitchen dialects spoken by great-grandmothers. The face of a man named Darrow who once sang to a dying star. All gone. But in the hollow worlds, lights began to appear. Not transmissions. Not pings. Responses. First in the outer reaches. Then from sealed vaults beneath shattered colony worlds. Then from a gas giant thought uninhabited. Then from Earth's ruins. Cora stared at the screens as the ship came alive. One signal repeated across the systems. I remember. She turned to Holt, her voice barely audible. Gods. He looked up. No. Not gods. Just ghosts who haven't forgotten how to fight. The outer spiral held its silence longer than most sectors. In the vacuum between burned worlds and ice-sheathed asteroids, a Terran relic drifted among wreckage. Hull fractured, its AI core dark. It had once been part of the 11th Vanguard, the last human fleet to challenge the Galactic Empire in direct combat. For nearly 200 years, it had played dead. Designation, Ravel's Mark. A Dread-class command carrier built before the Concordant decommissioning, it bore the scars of atmospheric incineration and orbital fragmentation. The hull plating, once burnished with the gold-on-red of the outer helix offensive, was now blackened and pitted, its iconography erased by centuries of drift and decay. Yet its spine remained intact. Its sensor veins, though dormant, clung to a shattered listening post buried in the crust of a dead moon named Serine. Serine's surface was a graveyard. Charred Terran ruins. Melted impact craters. Imperial monoliths half-submerged in glass stone. The Empire had struck the moon with 6 kinetic rods during the purge of Jeskara's reach, and left nothing behind but silence. Then the signal came. Terran old script. Mnemonic cadence. Authenticated by memory resonance. In the absence of light, let memory reign. Inside the Ravel's Mark, something stirred. A tremor passed through the cryostasis bays. The central cortical archive, long deemed dead, registered an anomaly. A resonance match. In the AI's deepest layers, a fragment named Ilex, 4 flickered awake. Ilex did not think. It remembered. It remembered the death songs of Cord Eva, the blood code resonance of the Anthelian mutiny, the scream of the last human child on Brask. Power rerouted through scorched conduits. Artificial muscles flexed. Defense routines blinked from red to amber. The ship's outer plating began to reshape itself, exhaling millennia of cosmic frost. Weapon hardpoints, 27 in all, reactivated. The Sedition Pulse had reached the hollow worlds. Serfold, the ship Holt had reawakened, hung like a silent blade beneath Lygium's spine. Inside its bridge, Cora paced along the command lattice, her boots clicking softly on the black alloy. The atmosphere was thin, recirculated through old Terran biosystems, inefficient by Imperial standards but strangely alive. Her fingers twitched. Holt hadn't spoken in over 10 minutes. He sat fused into the memory interface, his breathing shallow, skin pallid from neural strain. The resurrection protocols demanded mental calibration. Too much memory weight, and the interface could cause cascade collapse. Cora glanced at the forward displays. Another one. Holt stirred. Where? Outer spiral. Response from a Vanguard wreck. Old registry. Ravel's mark. Vector 1294. He nodded slowly. That wreck has teeth. She leaned in, watching the signal deepen. This isn't a recall. It's a contagion. The moment the memory signal hit critical mass, it bypassed suppression heuristics. It's rewriting the Empire's psychic net in real time. They designed it that way, Holt said. The old rebels. Every core in the fleet carried a fragment of the resurrection script. One voice activates it. Many voices sustain it. She turned toward him. And what happens when it's fully sustained? He didn't answer. On Jeskara 9, a hollow world abandoned before the Treaty of Subjugation. The ice cracked. Beneath 47 meters of frozen gas and sediment, a vault door opened. Steam poured into the vacuum. Atmospheric regulators hissed and spun to life after 3 centuries of silence. Within the vault, 10,000 Terran archive drones, hexagonal, insect-like, and etched with self-replicating scripture. Each drone contained one thread of memory, a family line, a song, a species name. Their purpose was preservation, not combat. The Sedition Pulse reached them in waves. One by one, their eyes glowed. They rose in silence. Not in formation, not in anger, in mourning. Their wings shimmered in subharmonic pulse, casting brief, golden shadows. As they climbed, they released not light but sound. Low-frequency vibrations that crawled beneath the skin. Static formed into syllables. Language emerged, not spoken, but exhaled. In the voice of the dead. Cora watched from Serfold's bridge as the signal reached them. The display screens shimmered, then ruptured into audio playback. A child's voice, singing in old script. High and fragile, the words unfurled. The stars once spoke our names / now silence wears our skin / but still we rise. From ash to song / to claim what lies within. Cora froze. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. I sang that, she whispered. On Jerash, before the fall. Holt looked at her. It was archived through blood channels. That song made it through Cordiva's extinction. Your voice might be in that lattice. She turned away, shoulders tight. This was never just about rebellion, was it? No, Holt said. It's about remembering what they tried to erase. He keyed the relay. Coordinates realigned. Jump! Praetor Ozer stood aboard the Veil Ascendant, a dreadnought born in the orbital foundries of Tryon-Keth. The bridge was shaped like a spire, with a gravity well at its core to focus command decisions through a weighted neural axis. The screens bathed the chamber in red. Report, Ozer said. The data officer, a xenohybrid bred for high-resolution visual parsing, did not turn from the console. 17 Terran relic sites have reactivated. 6 now transmitting mnemonic pulses. Archive drones detected in Jeskara, Eclipti, and Solvi Null. Containment. Minimal. Empire neural suppression protocols are failing across low-fidelity sectors. Collateral species are experiencing linguistic fragmentation. A muscle in Ozer's jaw tightened. The chorus of silence the Empire had built was no longer holding. He stared at the tactical overlay. Points of light bloomed across the hollow worlds, each one a scar refusing to fade. He turned to the weapons chief. Initiate cauterization procedures on all hollow worlds. No distinctions. No delay. If it has memory resonance, burn it. Inwardly, he felt the first edge of unease. Not panic. Not yet. But the systems he had trusted, the grand neural sieve, the centuries of programmed forgetfulness were unraveling. And in the corners of his mind, buried under logic walls, an old question surfaced. What if memory cannot be killed? The jump drive of Serfold bent light and sound into needlepoint silence. Then, they emerged, orbiting a brown dwarf star that shed no visible light, They arrived into the cradle of the 11th Vanguard. The darkness was complete, broken only by the lattice light now pulsing along ancient hulls. Dozens of ships, black-hulled, crippled, yet burning faintly with Terran code. The void between them was strewn with frozen debris, armor plating, shattered insignia, a drift of shattered bone lattice helmets. They were not in formation, not yet, but one by one they adjusted. A broken destroyer, Flameborn, aligned its prow with Serfold. An escort frigate flashed its old battle designation in hull-carved light, 31st Enteric Line. A signal pulsed from the wreck of the Lucian's Oath. A half-complete memory chorus in ghostly tone. Cora's voice trembled. "They're coming online." "Not just online," Holt said. He stepped forward. One hand rested on the command socket. The ship accepted him like a forgotten key. "They're remembering the war." A chorus rose, signals laced in light and song. The fleet began to converge, not with rage, but with ritual. Across the outer spiral, the dead began to sing. And the Empire, for the first time in centuries, listened in fear. The sun above Lysium dimmed, not through eclipse or natural decline, but by command. The station's core dampeners engaged without human input. Photonic mirrors reoriented. Illumination throttled. Across Senate Station Lysium, the artificial daylight died in a programmed dusk. Praetor Ozer stood at the edge of the command platform, his hands folded behind his back, his gaze fixed on the bleeding light over the central spire. His voice, when it came, was not raised. "Seal all transit gates. Interlock the arcology sectors. Disable diplomatic immunity protocols." None of the officers questioned him. The command bridge and Oculus suspended in gravity anchors above the Senate dome responded with perfect silence. Below them, Lysium, jewel of neutrality, hub of ritual consensus, was already beginning to fracture. Dozens of species were trapped in ceremonial apartments. Locked gravity halls. Sealed speech pits. The Empire issued no official declaration. It didn't need to. Silence sufficed. In its vacuum, dread took root. Ozer turned to the spire's neural core and pressed his hand against the access panel. A pulse of authorization confirmed his identity. Initiate the Lysium purge. Focus first on cultural variance sectors. Begin with the human underlayer. The core hesitated for 1.2 seconds. Long enough to doubt. Then the order deployed. In the underlayers of Lysium, below the oxygen-rich ceremonial tiers, ancient corridors flickered to life. Pale golden emergency glyphs lit the walls, Terran standard, long obsolete, used before the Lexicon Harmonization Act rendered all interface scripts uniform. Holt and Cora moved fast, the air thick with the scent of dusted ion coils and disuse. Vault 12 was sealed behind them, the Serfold's jump signature still echoing in the walls like an aftershock. "Ozer's going to wipe the station," Cora said, breath sharp from the climb. Holt didn't slow. "He'll start with memory sectors. Anything not broadcast aligned. Ritual centers first. Refuge enclaves next." They turned down a maintenance chute, their feet striking polymetal grates warped by centuries of entropy. The chute was lined with rusted handrails etched with graffiti in over a dozen scripts. Cora paused at a T-junction. Behind the wall, something thumped. "Security constructs?" she asked. "No," Holt said. He knelt beside a panel and keyed in a hidden sequence. The wall split along an unseen seam. A metal iris dilated with a hiss. "Refugees." Inside the maintenance alcove, 24 faces turned toward the light, human, xeno, hybrid. Children wrapped in thermal cloth, their eyes blinking in the dimness. Elders hunched beside broken field rations, vocal translators cracked at the base. Scavengers. Band chroniclers. Exiled dream archivists. Survivors of previous purges who had learned to live where no censor dared peer. Cora's jaw tightened. They stayed. They remembered, Holt said. Even when nothing else did. He stepped into the alcove and knelt beside a boy no older than 10, his skin marked with ceremonial Terran paint, 3 lines across the brow, a circle over the heart. "Do you remember the passage?" The boy nodded, eyes wide. Holt whispered the opening verse of the Sedition Pulse. The boy finished it, steady. Word perfect. Above, the Senate dome ruptured. Not from attack. From inside. Imperial containment protocols activated gravity locks too close to the core structure. Photonic lensing failed. The ceremonial strata collapsed in a chain reaction of imploding light fields. Senators and aides were vaporized in silence, bodies unmade by vector distortions before emergency veils could engage. The vacuum exposed the dome's hollow interior, perfectly symmetrical, mathematically pure. For a moment, the Empire's imposed order was laid bare. Then the light died, and unfiltered memory screamed. The sound came not from mouths, but from walls. From the station's sublayer. From the floorstone and circuitry. A chorus of all things denied, laughter forbidden, dialects excised, lullabies lost. Lysium remembered what it had been forced to forget. Gravity wavered. Heat flushed from the walls and waves. Magnetics fluctuated, light patterns stuttered across the corridor floors like breathless heartbeat scans. Holt led the survivors through the tertiary relay spire. Cora walked point, rifle drawn, her boots leaving prints in the dust of a corridor untraveled since the Accord Wars. Emergency lighting pulsed at uneven intervals, but something deeper had awakened. Not power. Not resistance. Memory. Lysium had never been a station. Not truly. It had been a reservoir. A tomb lined with forgotten dreams. The Sedition Pulse had turned it into a beacon, and now those dreams were no longer still. As they passed through corridor rings, the walls spoke. Not in any single voice. In thousands. We were here. We saw you. We are not erased. Each syllable resonated not in the ear, but in the chest. Children paused to listen. Cora gritted her teeth. Holt watched the shadows stretch and pulse with meaning. A door opened into a hollow chamber once used for diplomatic ritual. Circular. Silver-veined. Quiet. An altar sat at its center, overgrown with moss that had no biological classification. Then a flicker of movement. A Terran construct, spherical, silver-black, etched with fracture lines, drifted from the far wall. It twitched midair, then fell. Holt caught it. Is it still functional? Cora asked, voice low. No, Holt said. His hands trembled. But it remembers the way. He pressed it against the chamber's altar. A line of light appeared. Glyphs bloomed across the floor. A door peeled open at the chamber's edge, a maintenance ring last used during the unification treaties before the neural grid sterilized private memory. Go, Holt said. I'll follow. Cora hesitated. You can't stay here. I'm not staying. I'm closing the gate behind you. He handed her the construct. Take them to the Serfold. You know where she'll be. Cora looked at the children. Then back at him. For Jerash. For all of them, Holt said. As the tunnel sealed, Holt turned back toward the altar. He reached beneath it and pulled a rusted interface jack from the floor, one older than the Empire itself. He keyed in the last fragment of the Sedition Pulse, not to transmit, but to embed it permanently in Lysium's core lattice. The station wouldn't just fall. It would echo. Praetor Ozer watched Lysium die from orbit. The station's outer structure rippled with distortions. Not fire. Not fracture. Resonance. The Dreadnought Veil Ascendant registered cascading data failures. Sector 17A noncompliant, linguistic suppression breach, ritual memory echo loop forming, warning, Lysium infrastructure rejecting command hierarchy. The central spire bent inward as if bowing. The station's oldest layers shimmered with golden glyphs, Terran in origin, long classified as inert. Lights blinked out, then back on in patterns matching ancestral star maps. Ozer's jaw locked. A fragment of something cold and ancient tightened in his spine. He had seen planetary mutinies, AI rebellions, ritual suicides in failed colonies. But never this. This was not disobedience. This was refusal. Fire upon the core, he ordered. No targeting solution, the weapons officer said. Every layer is reconfiguring. Identity matrix is unstable. We can't lock onto the station. It's dreaming. Ozer said nothing. The war had begun long before Holt's speech. But now it had a rhythm. A voice. A name. And that name would never be silent again. The hollow rift bled colorless light into the bridge of the Serfold. Cora sat at the helm, breath fogging faintly in the recycled air. Around her, the ship hummed with a slow, methodical pulse. Something deeper than mechanical rhythm. It wasn't the sound of thrusters or stabilizers. It was the heartbeat of a machine that remembered it had once been human. The Serfold's memory core, salvaged from the ruins of the Hero Codex engine, was not made to run a ship. It was made to preserve Terran grief. The ship navigated not by chart, but by association. Where grief lingered longest, it found purpose. Cora's hands hovered over the interface. It didn't respond to commands. It never had. It responded to proximity, to memory. Below deck, the children slept, curled into one another like migrating animals. 3 adults kept watch. One was an archivist from Jeskara whose tongue had been severed by Harmony priests. Another, a xenobiologist from the Marin strain, filtered air through her gill rings while whispering extinct bird names. The third was Terran-born, silenced by trauma, his face tattooed with fractal hymns. They did not speak much. No one aboard the Serfold did. But memory never required sound. Outside the viewport, the rift yawned. A wound in the galactic skin. The hollow rift was not on any Imperial chart. Officially, it did not exist. A distortion zone 20 light-minutes wide where navigation broke and chronometry reversed. Here, the Empire had erased an entire sector. Not destroyed, not cleansed. Erased. Planets removed from charts. Moons mined and then memory scrubbed. Civilizations overwritten with simulations. The only evidence that anything had lived here was the rift itself. And beneath it, deeper than space should allow, the archive. The coordinates came not as numbers, but as glyphs. They pulsed onto the Serfold's interface like a memory resurfacing from a dream. Cora reached for them. The moment her fingers brushed the control lattice, the ship shifted. Not with thrusters, but with silence. Stars twisted around them. Light stretched, bled, and folded, then stopped. The deep archive hung beneath the rift like a heartbeat hidden under bone. It was not a structure. It was a presence. Formless from distance, but textured as the Serfold approached. A sphere of folded matter, wrapped in coils of stellar remnants. Not rotating, not drifting, breathing. No beacon lights, no access codes. But as the ship neared, its systems slowed. Lights dimmed. Hull sensors dulled as if entering the womb of something ancient and alive. Cora stood at the viewing deck, jaw tight. The archive filled the viewport. The closer she got, the more she felt it. Not with her senses, but with her memory. Images bubbled in her mind. Smells. Sounds. Words she hadn't spoken since Jerash. She heard her sister laughing. Her father's bootsteps on snow. Her mother's voice singing a verse from a hymn outlawed on 17 worlds. She didn't cry. The archive wasn't a trigger. It was a mirror. The Serfold docked without permission. No clamps. No corridors. Just an iris of black stone opening like a flower. She went alone. Inside, gravity folded sideways. The entrance corridor pulsed with a golden ashlight. The walls were not built, they were remembered, etched with thin crystalline veins, each one glowing with emotional resonance. Cora touched one and felt a moment. A wedding in an orbital garden above Cord Eva. The couple had no names, but the joy was intact. She continued forward. Every step deeper into the archive peeled something away. Not her memories, her protection from them. She passed vaults that burned to look at. Inside, fragments of identity, unmoored from context. A chess piece from Earth's last museum. A shuttle door etched with every human dialect ever erased. A child's prosthetic arm. A banner from the Final Dawn Rebellion. A helmet split by plasma. The interior inscribed with a mother's final prayer. The archive did not preserve data. It exhaled it. Here time stuttered. Cora walked for minutes that lasted hours or the other way around. At one point, she heard Holt's voice. Not present, not recording, but recent. He had been here. His passage had left resonance marks. She knelt and touched them. A sorrow embedded in static. A final act encoded in silence. A glyph beneath her fingers pulsed. He had opened the gate but not entered. She was the answer to the question he left behind. Finally, the corridor opened. The chamber was vast, circular, and hollow. At its center hovered a construct, humanoid in frame, faceless, articulated in floating segments of metal and light. It shimmered between presence and projection, a being made of will and loss, turned without moving. "You carry a fragment," it said. Its voice was not a single tone. It was a braided chorus, male, female, child, alien, machine. A library of extinction given voice. Cora lifted the sphere Holt had given her. The construct did not take it. Instead, it extended a hand that split into threads of silver. They hung in the air like veins without skin. The The memory is not complete. The war was not finished. But the seed remains. Pause. Will you be the vessel? Around her, the walls ignited with vision. Fleets stirring in half-sleep. Terran vessels buried in nebulae. Songs carried by xeno-tribes who thought them myths. Holt kneeling at the altar beneath Lygium. Ozer staring into a command interface blinking with ancestral code. Children on forgotten moons whispering language forbidden before their birth. Cora stepped closer. Her breath slowed. The construct waited. Do you consent to remember what they destroyed? She did not answer aloud. She only opened her mind. And the archive entered. The first sensation was heat. Not physical. Emotional. Then pressure like grief becoming gravity. Color, red-orange pulses that bled through thought. Words flooded her vision. Images folded in on themselves. She saw the original Sedition Pulse being coded. By hands that trembled with hunger and hope. She felt the final riot on Terranol. The moment the last of Earth's oceans were encrypted into a dream lattice and launched into the void. She saw the people who had held the line. Not warriors. Not leaders. Witnesses. Archivists. Lovers. Children. She felt the archive fusing with her. Threading memory through her veins. Rewriting the structure of thought. Her skin crawled with ancestral knowledge. She smelled rain from planets long gone. Tasted food never made again. Sang in languages she had never spoken. The archive did not weaponize memory. It let it live. On the Serfold, the lights shifted. The ship pulsed with golden rhythm. One by one, the children stirred. The boy who had recited the pulse in the tunnels of Lygium sat upright. His eyes glowed faintly with memory light. The girl beside him whispered a name she had never known but somehow remembered. Cora. In the rift, the deep archive bloomed. Flares of mnemonic signal erupted in geometric precision. Shapes resembling Terran constellations. Fractal spirals used in outlawed memory rites. Whole patterns etched into space like scripture. And far across the stars, ships changed course. Vessels that had drifted for centuries turned in silence. Not toward war. Toward witness. The next pulse would not be broadcast. It would be lived. The first ship arrived without sound. It emerged from the veil between pulses, a corridor of gravitational shimmer between ruined systems. No transponder. No markings. The hull was scorched black, its silhouette broken by centuries of impact scars and silent drift. But the configuration was unmistakable. Terran. Cora stood on the forward observation deck of the Serfold, her body still not fully her own. The archive's imprint was raw beneath her skin, threading through her breath and vision. Every heartbeat echoed names she didn't recognize but felt responsible for. She touched the viewport's rim, watched as the ship drew closer. The Serfold shivered in recognition. Behind her, the others watched. The children had stopped speaking. The adults did not ask questions. They simply knew, as if memory had passed from idea to instinct. The moment the archive awakened, something changed in the fabric of witness. Cora wasn't the message. She was the mirror. Inside, she felt a sharp ache bloom behind her sternum. It wasn't pain. It was remembering. 1,000 eyes blinking open inside her skull. Joys she never lived. Losses she never earned. All passed to her through blood and signal. The arriving ship did not dock. It floated nearby, lights dimmed, its hull humming with pulse signatures. Glyphs along its spine lit one by one. Not a call for aid. Not a threat. A signal. I remember. Cora tilted her head, parsing the glyphs not with her mind, but with memory. They were carved not by language, but by grief ritual strokes etched with plasma cutters and oath soldered into hullskin. Each curve recited an unspoken loss, the fall of Jerash, the silence of Iraq, 3, the vanished orbiters of Sol V Null. Then another ship appeared. This one from the black edge lines of the Alone Dustfield. Smaller. Wedge-shaped. Outer Colonies vintage. Its hull bore hull-scribed prayers in 4 dialects, including one banned so long ago even the Empire's censors had lost the language keys. A flicker of soft orange light pulsed from its dorsal antennae, its version of salute. A third came from the ice halls of Cetra 4. Then 6 more. Then 20. They emerged from the rift, from between stars, from memory-blind corridors of forgotten space. Some were barely functional, stitched together from agricultural platforms and solar husks. Others shimmered with ancient defenses, runes etched over blast plating. A freighter transmitted through liquid spectrum, the sound of tears hitting metal. Another ship, the Silent Prophecy, rotated slowly, broadcasting a hologram of two hands touching, a mother and a daughter never named, forever mid-embrace. Each one bore a different memory architecture. Some transmitted no data at all, only rhythm. Others leaked fragments of forbidden symphonics. A few beamed fragments of extinct Terran alphabets, intact only because they were hand-chiseled into steel. Around this airfold, the void began to fill. Not with an armada. With evidence. Cora returned to the helm. She no longer interfaced with the ship. She was the interface. The archive within her laced across every console, every sensor. The airfold breathed with her. The fleet did not form rank. It formed resonance. Each ship held a testimony. Not strategic. Not weaponized. Personal. A final broadcast. A last breath. One vessel held the death chime of an orbital nursery erased during the core diva purges. Another transmitted only a heartbeat, the final biometric trace of a child who died with no name. The Echo fleet was not summoned. It had been remembered into being. Each memory a star. Each silence a map. Each ship a wound refusing to scar. Cora's hands trembled on the console, but not from fear. From clarity. These ships were not here to win. They were here to haunt. The Empire could not refute what it could not destroy. The airfold's sensor spine rippled. Cora turned her eyes upward. Space bent, then split. The final ship arrived. It came not from a direction, but from inside a fold, a break in vector continuity where time had forgotten how to flow. Its hull was jagged, unfinished. Sewn from the bones of broken dreadnoughts. Imperial killstruts jutted like ribs from its core. Terran alloy filled the gaps, not sleek, but brutal. The airfold blinked in acknowledgement. Not a greeting. A mourning. The ship bore no name. But it carried Holt's signal. Cora stood still. The bridge was quiet, except for the faint hum of child breath and the recursive heartbeat of 1,000 lives embedded in the walls. She stepped to the forward comms relay. The glyph interface bloomed beneath her hands. The archive within her stirred. And spoke. Not in her voice. In his. This is the fleet that does not forget. This is the war that will not kill. This is the memory that walks. A wave moved through the Echo fleet. Lights flared. Not red for warning. Not green for alignment. Gold. For truth. On a drift ship from the drowned colonies, a choir of child voices activated. On an old mining rig from Terra 5, a pulse beacon carved from bone initiated a rhythmic transmission. From the ruins of a forgotten lunar vault, a symphony played, not through instruments, but through light modulation. The testimony expanded. Not like data. Like breath. On Arden Prime, where Imperial doctrine was taught through neural imprints, a schoolroom fell silent. A child stood and spoke words the system could not parse. The instructor screamed. The child kept speaking. On Jeskara's ashes, a seed bloomed in soil that should be dead. On the prison world of Marrow 9, a guard dropped their rifle and began humming a lullaby their ancestors had forgotten. Signals reached them before awareness. Not transmission. Recognition. The Empire called it mutiny. The archive called it testimony. The Echo fleet moved together now, not toward battle, but toward bearing witness. Not with weapons, but with memory. Cora stepped back from the helm. Her body glowed faintly at the skin, traces of archive glyphwork threading through her veins. They're listening, she said aloud, not to anyone in particular. And all across the stars, worlds long silent, turned their receivers toward the dark. Not to resist. To remember. Praetor Ozer stood alone in the starlit vault of the Veil Ascendant, his reflection scattered across a dozen hollow screens. None of them held sound. No alarm tones. No fleet status updates. No confirmatory pings from the suppression grid. Silence. Across the span of the command deck, officers and tacticians sat frozen, faces blank, hands idle, transfixed by the same expanding golden lattice sweeping across the fleet interface. Data corrupted not by virus, but by remembrance. Subroutines rewritten by ghost signals. Lexicons overwritten with extinct phonemes. He had issued no new orders in over 3 hours. There were none left to give. The Echo fleet pulsed in orbit above a dead moon, a nameless fragment long rendered inert during the subjugation wars. Now its surface reflected soft bands of gold and ash, illuminated not by fire but by resonance. Every ship in the fleet cast its memory as light, each beam a wound, a whisper, a truth the Empire could no longer categorize. Their signal harmonics were destabilizing Imperial sensors. Logic trees crashed. Predictive models returned recursive loops. The data engines aboard the Veil Ascendant whispered echoes of themselves and began parsing their own output as foreign. It was not sabotage. It was infection. Memory reasserting itself through the cracks of a flawless silence. Ozer turned from the command ring. His steps carried him through the bridge's inner threshold, past inute drone cores and muting AI spires. As he moved, systems dimmed in his wake. The ship recognized its master's descent but no longer understood what it meant. He entered the central lift. No destination was input. The elevator simply moved, gravity reversing once, then twice, before slowing into an unfamiliar stillness. Lights along the seam flickered amber, not empire white. They pulsed in an old cadence, pre-standardized. He stepped out into the sanctum. The chamber had not been used in decades. Vaulted and narrow, the sanctum was lined in reflection alloy, black mirror metal woven from semi-reactive iron memory crystal. It had been designed for still-thought training, a meditative purging chamber for imperial ascendants. Ozer had been brought here once as a young prodigy, before his soul had a name and his blood still sang songs he was later ordered to forget. He did not recognize the glyphs on the wall now. They shimmered with latent heat. Some of them shifted as he passed, as if remembering his presence. In the center of the room stood the Axis node. It was grown, not built. Fused from bioorganic neural mesh and imperial command lattice, it hovered within a cradle of suspended magnetic architecture. Its glow had once been blue-white, directive. Now it pulsed gold. Seeking. Ozer approached. His boots echoed once, then not at all. As if the chamber had inhaled. He raised his hands. Pressed both palms to the node. It did not respond with system status. It responded with sound. A voice rose from the node, layered and strange. Not one speaker. Thousands. No static. No distortion. Clarity forged from contrast. Why did you silence us? Why did you forget your name? Why did you help them kill our breath? The voice was not angry. It was tired. He flinched. A line of sweat traced down his spine. I never wanted this. I followed the silence because they told me it was peace. Ozer recoiled. Breath gone from his chest. His knees buckled. Memory lanced through his neural core. He saw a woman drop a bowl of ashes and pick up a blade. A child tracing their ancestor's name in dust. A city paved with fused names lit only by dying hymns. He tried to shut the interface. He thought the override sequence. Nothing. The Axis node pulsed again. You wore our faces while burning our homes. You coded our memories into maps for their engines. You cut our names from your tongue. Ozer screamed. Not aloud. Inside. The node showed him more. His conversion room. White, humming. Needles along his spine. Language stripped. Identity reduced to serials and service designations. The sound of a lullaby drowned beneath the drone of correction pulses. He had been restructured. Rewritten. But not deleted. The pulse had found the fracture. And now it poured through him. He clenched his teeth, hands shaking on the interface. Was I always a hollow voice? Or did they make me one? On the command deck, the crew of the Veil Ascendant watched as the Echo fleet completed its resonance pattern. The ships had not moved into formation. They had simply arranged themselves in memory logarithmic scale. Not by mass or function or class, but by grief. The silent prophecy drifted at the edge, radiating images of lost mothers. The grief rod held a fixed position above the dead moon, its hull fractured to form the old script word for witness. A junior analyst whispered, I know that word. No one replied. Another dropped a datapad. The screen cracked, unreadable. He didn't pick it up. One by one, the ships began to vanish. Not into jump. Into unrecognition. The Empire's linguistics arrays failed to resolve their identifiers. The ships became less visible not from stealth, but from lack of vocabulary. They were being forgotten by the machine. And remembered by the living. Inside the sanctum, Ozer collapsed. His face met the mirrored floor. Sweat pooled in the crease of his neck. The node's light cast long lines over his skin, revealing traces beneath the surface, glyphs encoded during indoctrination, now flaring under the archive's influence. Then he saw it. His name. Buried deep in his memory core, wrapped in binding code, layered beneath years of compliance, a syllable. Then another. Then a shape his voice had not formed in centuries. Not Ozer. Something older. He tried to say it. His mouth moved. Sound cracked out. It was not loud. It did not echo. But it was his. When the syllables passed his lips, he felt something tear loose behind his eyes, like the unsealing of a door he hadn't known existed. The Axis node blinked once, and fell silent. Outside, the fleet pulsed once more. The Sarefold led now not as flagship, but as beacon. The archive sang through it in waves of resonance, light, and motion. No orders. No tactics. Just remembrance. On a world called Varrock II, long erased from imperial history, a network of buried ruins lit with golden breath. On a lunar archive station near Cordiva, glyphs activated on every wall. A forgotten tongue filled the void, songs of mothers, names of vanished kin, dreams once outlawed. On the Veil Ascendant, the main hollow array dimmed. Officers looked at one another. They had no commands. No targets. Only echoes. Ozer rose to his feet. Unsteady. Hollowed. Cleansed in grief not his own. He placed one hand on the axis node. It didn't respond. And neither did he. He left the sanctum and did not return to the bridge. He walked the spine of the ship in silence, glyphs trailing faintly beneath his feet, his presence activating memory threads buried in the metal. He passed a young tech officer. She opened her mouth to speak. He placed a finger to his lips. She nodded and said nothing. The fleet did not wait. It moved. Not toward conquest. Toward witness. Toward truth. The Serfold drifted at the edge of a system stripped bare. 12 planets had once circled a red-white giant here. Now there was only the star, pale and trembling, its corona stilled. Around it, debris rings flattened to silence. Orbit tracks intact, yet no bodies remained. Not shattered. Not mined. Not erased. Silenced. Cora stood at the forward interface, her breath fogging slightly in the recycled chill. The silence clawed at her skin like static. This place had been cut from sound, not merely evacuated but overwritten. The archive within her stirred in recognition, its presence deep and aching. She could feel the gap where memory should be. The archive called the system Carden. The Empire called it nothing designates 7. 12 cultures, 12 ecosystems, 12 languages, all nullified. No atmosphere remained to carry song. No tectonics to echo movement. No wind to brush leaves, no vibration to mark time. Silence weaponized into historical annihilation. The Empire had sealed the system not with fire, but with vacuum. She lowered her hand to the console. Around her, the children slept, cocooned in thermoplast blankets, watched by the 3 survivors who had joined them in flight. The Serfold pulsed gently, synced to her breath. Its console lights were dimmed, not in stealth, but in reverence. "We're ready," she whispered. The Echo fleet did not respond with signal. It responded with presence. One by one, the ships unfurled. Not weapons. Archives. Each vessel extended its comm lattice not outward, but inward, linking memory to memory, witness to witness. Their shapes changed subtly, deflectors retracted, projection spines emerged, resonance ports opened like ancient petals. Where once they had broadcast silence, now they prepared to speak. Not as a fleet. As a memory choir. The first voice came not in sound, but in vibration. A Marin archivist on the verdict of Salt spoke in tied harmonics, her native language encoded in fluid movement and echo delay. The ship projected her story across 20 hulls in synchronized oscillation. Each rhythm a layer of grief, the loss of a continent to atmospheric sterilization. The final breath of a kelp forest. The name of a lover who dissolved in carbon tide. Next came a Terran dialect once used only in cradle songs. It emerged from the heirloom, a drift vessel that had carried 3 generations through imperial blockade. A voice recited 37 names, children lost at birth, their lives preserved only through mnemonic inheritance. On the Ash Witness, a hybrid child broadcast a forbidden lineage map. The Empire had declared their blood an error. Now it streamed, line by line, in chromatic code, skin light flickering down their arms, across their face, into the vacuum. From the spine of the broken, there came no words, only a light hymn. A geometry of pulses in gold and violet designed to reawaken shared neural patterns. As it played, Cora felt herself rocked by an emotion she could not name. Grief sharpened into clarity. Memory compressed into radiance. Each vessel in the fleet was no longer a ship. It was a voice. The Serfold trembled under Cora's feet. The pulse moved again. But it was no longer a broadcast. It was witnessing. Across the fleet, each ship lit its hull with personal resonance marks, scratched identifiers, glyphs etched in grief. On the hollow saint, every survivor inscribed a single word in the language of the place they had lost. The hull became a veil of vanished tongues. Cora felt it all. Not in her ears. In her bones. The archive was not just inside her. It was her. Every transmission passed through her spine like gravity. Her fingers trembled against the console. She wasn't speaking. She was becoming. Worlds began to shift. On the fringe colonies of Ardesh Line, miners working near a collapsed language vault reported dreams, perfect recall of names they had never learned. In the orbital tower above Geranol, an old priest began singing a chant abolished during the Doctrine Purge. He had never heard it before. He wept and didn't know why. On a station above the ash flow circuit, an automated sensor array began producing coded symbols. Not telemetry, not alerts, poetry. The archive amplified every signal not by power but by proximity. It no longer needed transmission lines. Memory moved through remembrance itself. In the halls of the Imperial Core, data streams fractured. Neurolace tacticians stared at interface walls gone soft with golden glyphs. Analysts whispered phrases they could not translate. High Commander Varen issued emergency protocol initiations Alpha Zeta 9. None responded. The Empire's great silence had been breached not by warheads, not by fleets, but by stories. By remembrance. By presence. On the Vale Ascendant, Ozer stood motionless. The silence was absolute. Then every terminal blinked. At once. In glyphs no one had permission to use. We are still here. No one on the bridge spoke. But 1,000 voices echoed from the bulkheads, consoles, walls. Old signals. Archived breaths. Laughter embedded in steel. The shape of forgotten names rippling across the floor in soft light. Not rebellion. Recollection. Cora opened the final seal. The archive within her bloomed. Its memory lattice extended through the Serfold into every ship, every soul still listening. Her voice, amplified through archive resonance, reached not through space, but through memory space. We were erased. Not defeated. The words carried no threat. Only truth. Her body burned with presence, ears ringing, bones humming. The stories did not pass through her anymore. They stayed. In that moment, the fleet sang, not in unison, but in weave. A polyphony of extinction and survival. A tapestry of loss, bound not by blood, but by shared remembering. From the void between systems, a final signal bloomed. Not encoded. Not directed. Simply spoken. Voices. Countless. Woven. Tethered. Some were tears. Others laughter. Some rage, others blessing. The pulse spread not as fire, but as testimony. On a ship long thought wrecked, a young girl recited the tale of her people's last meal. On a drifting archive tomb, a spectral AI reactivated and played a final symphony in dying light. And far below, on a planet once sealed by silence, a child looked up and heard their name in the wind for the first time. And through it all, the Empire began to fracture. Not through war. Through story. Through the 1,000 voices the silence could not hold. The Ashen Gate was not marked on any star chart. It did not glow. It did not radiate. It did not bend starlight. It simply was. A static scar, stitched into the veil between galaxies. A ragged perimeter of folded time, surrounded by gravitational shadows and lightless mass. It was older than drift space. Older than the Empire. Older, perhaps, than memory itself. It did not orbit. It did not pulse. It hung where no thing should remain, nestled in the emptiness beyond navigation. Long ago, before the harmonization wars, before pathweights and jump threading, the Ashen Gate had been something else. A passage, a ritual, promise. Now it was sealed, locked behind layers of semantic erasure, dimensional distortion, and ritual silencing. Its existence had been legislated into myth. Its coordinates struck from thought. Ships could not navigate to it with numbers, could not be found by trajectory, could only be found by remembering. And the Echo Fleet remembered. The Serfold led them across the quiet. Systems behind them stirred with song and signal. Planets glowed with reawakened prayers. But ahead of them, silence once more. Not imposed. Waiting. Cora stood at the forward helm. She had not spoken aloud in hours. Her voice had gone inward. Her body had become language. She was the archive now, nerve-deep, marrow-laced, encoded. Glyph light pulsed beneath her skin like breath caught in glass. She no longer gave commands. She remembered direction, and the Serfold moved. But even now, with every ship behind her, with the pulse coursing through the stars, she felt it. That fragile hush before revelation. Not fear, not doubt. Just immensity. She thought of Holt, of the first signal, of everything lost, and what must now be carried. Below her, the children did not sleep. They listened, to the hum of the void curling around them, to the resonance of truth gathering behind every star. The gate revealed itself not with light, but with absence. The fleet's long-range sensors detected it first as a blind spot. No radiation, no echo return. A hollow in the pattern of cosmic background noise. Perfect void in signal lattice. As they drew closer, gravitational inconsistencies pulled the ships into harmonic orbit, each vessel settling without engine adjustment, as if space itself had anticipated their formation. Then it appeared. The Ashen Gate was not a structure. It was a memory complex rendered in spatial metaphor. To the Marin crew of the Verdict of Salt, it looked like a spiraling wave frozen mid-collapse. To the old Terran engineers aboard the heirloom, it resembled an inverted cathedral dome, ribbed in fused alloy. To the children aboard the Serfold, it looked like nothing at all. But they knew it was real. The archive confirmed each vision. Every witness saw what they had once lost, and every loss mapped the gate anew. The first ship to respond was the Griefraught, its hull tattooed with ultraviolet memorial glyphs. A ritual beacon extended from its undercarriage, a spiked iron lattice etched with Terran burial code, forged from melted weapons and heirlooms. Cast no signal, cast remembrance. One by one, the other ships followed. From the Hollow Saint, a flock of drone lanterns emerged, each carrying a single band symbol from an extinct tongue. Then, from the spine of the Broken came sound not audible in vacuum, but translated into electromagnetic bloom. A Marin lament, layered in water spectrum harmonics. It sang of oceans boiled to glass. The gate did not open. It unfolded. A seam split through the absence, like fabric pulled loose by breath. Behind it, architecture, vast, lightless, alive. The Echo fleet moved. No engines, no thrust. The ships entered not into location, but into alignment. The Ashen Gate was not territory. It was threshold. Crossing it required no mass, only memory. As each vessel passed, its resonance field adapted. Shapes shifted. Color fields changed. Language was rewritten into the hull. The Serfold led the way. Inside, the ship dimmed. Its interior walls shifted color. No longer blue-silver, but dark iron veined with golden threads. Cora stepped down from the helm into the central corridor. Her steps made no sound. Not because the ship was silent, but because it had become aware. The archive within her pulsed. A corridor opened below the Serfold. The chamber was vast, circular, old beyond language. Its walls curved like the inside of a world. At its heart, 12 thrones. Not built but grown from a material no scanner could read. Each one held no body, only shape, impressions, memory-given architecture. This was the Council of the Lost. Not rulers, not judges, witnesses. The first to speak was a light structure from the heirloom, encoded with genetic memories from Terran refugees. It unfolded like a flower of sound and smoke. Then the Ash Witness released its testimony, a spectral dance of color and crytone, each motion recalling a forbidden wedding. On the Verdict of Salt, the archivist who had spoken in tides emerged. Her voice carried across the chamber as compressed resonance. We remember the names they told us to forget. From every ship, testimony flowed. Not as data, not as power, as presence. The chamber responded. Walls brightened. Glyphs burned across the floor. Columns breathed in rhythm. Then, a corridor formed. Not a door, not a tunnel. Path of truth. It shimmered not with light, but with memory. Bands of color impossible to see but easy to feel. Names echoed in its curve. Every loss etched into its arc. It stretched forward through layered gravity and soft silence, leading to something beyond distance. Visible only in memory spectrum. The archive turned to Cora. It is time. She looked to the children. Their eyes glowed faintly with inherited light. She looked to the fleet. Silent, still, endlessly alive. She looked to the shape of the Empire far behind them now, and stepped forward. Not into conquest, into remembrance. The corridor of truth had no end. It stretched not through space, but through weight, memory layered so densely it bent perception. Cora moved forward, step by step, her pace no longer determined by effort or will, but by alignment. The archive within her threaded light across her vision, mapping emotion as architecture, regret as gravity. Each moment she moved, she passed through centuries. A whisper here, an extinct dialect spoken by lovers in exile. A tremor there, the final heartbeat of a buried city encoded into stone. The corridor adjusted to her passage, a path not of stone or steel but of witnessing. Behind her, the Echo fleet remained in resonance orbit. Ships no longer needed propulsion. They moved by memory. They existed by testimony. Every hull a scripture. Every drone a psalm. Cora's body hummed with inherited energy. Her fingertips sparked faint glyphire with every brush of invisible surface. She no longer carried the archive. She conducted it like bone conducts song, like skin remembers touch. Then the corridor narrowed. And he was there. Holt. Not a man. Not a ghost. A presence held together by resonance. He stood at the edge of space not by occupation but by continuance. Threads of signal memory wove around him in gentle spirals, recorded breath, preserved grief, harmonic pulses left in his wake. He looked the same. Not unchanged. Remembered. His face was calm. Weathered. Honest. You came, he said. His voice was not nostalgic. It was present. Real. I followed, she answered. They stood for a long moment in silence. It was not empty. Holt led her forward into the final chamber. Beyond the ashen gate, inside the innermost ring of resonance, was a cradle of memory, a vast chamber, spherical and dark, veined with interwoven pulse light. The walls pulsed faintly with breath rhythm. Beneath their feet, the floor was transparent, showing depthless memory layers swirling below like liquid thought. At the center floated the pulse core. It did not hum. It did not glow with power. It glowed with recognition. A lattice of memory threads, metallic and soft, suspended in harmonic balance. It had no central interface. No command prompt. Only presence. Holt gestured to it. This is where it began, he said. Cora stepped closer. She could feel the weight of it not in mass, but in truth. Every testimony, every pain, every fragment of resistance collected in one core, alive and waiting. They tried to erase us, Holt said, his voice low. But they never understood what memory really is. She reached toward the pulse. It didn't resist. It listened. They deleted our maps, she said. Our names. Our lineages. But they couldn't delete what had been witnessed. The pulse core responded, blooming outward like a flower of mnemonic light. Cora turned to him. They'll come again, she said. The Empire never rests. They'll bury this too. They won't have to, Holt replied. He stepped to her side. His outline flickered, less a body, more a tether of light and time. Because now the memory won't be hidden. It will live in everyone we've reached. Everyone who listens. We're not here to protect the archive. We're here to release it. And what happens when they hear it? Holt smiled. A soft thing. The kind he wore only once before when he first taught her the old codes. They'll hear the truth in the silence. The pulse core flared once. Not like light. Like understanding. Across the Echo fleet, across the outer colonies, across the faded bones of systems once sterilized by imperial doctrine, signal echoes began to emerge. Not as commands. Not as demands. As reminders. On a windless moon in the gray fold, a mother hummed a song banned before her birth. Her infant responded, though they had never heard it before. On a derelict freighter trapped in drift space, automated systems reactivated. Old logs, long sealed, played aloud. Testimonies of forgotten laborers, prayers, diary entries, laughter. The vessel redirected. In the grand temple of imperial concordance, a glyph appeared on the high altar. No one could read it, but thousands felt it, and wept. And in a listening post on the Empire's edge, a lone technician received a data spike from the Ashen Vector. He reached for the delete key, and didn't press it. The pulse did not end. It ceased. Cora turned to Holt. Are you coming back? He shook his head gently. I was the initial resonance. The first dissonant note. I held the shape so it wouldn't collapse. But now you've reshaped the field. She stepped closer. Her hands brushed the edge of his presence. It was warm. You were never just the first, she whispered. You were enough. He blinked slowly. A final pulse ran along his silhouette. I was only the beginning. He placed one hand over his heart. You are what remains. She wept, and it was not sadness. It was survival. She walked back through the corridor of truth. It shimmered differently now, colors deeper, harmonics slower. Her steps echoed in rhythm with the testimonies she carried. Faces formed along the corridor walls. Not ghosts. History. Behind her, Holt did not fade. He turned to light. He flickered. And he bowed. Then his outline dissolved, not into shadow, but into threads of mnemonic pattern ascending into the core like smoke, into starlight. Into the archive. Into story. The Serfold opened. Children rushed to her, their voices layered in remembered song. One held a fragment of old data, a ceramic memory plate, and pressed it into her palm. We saved one, he said. From Lygium. She nodded. Touched the helm. The archive searched. Across the stars, silences broke, not with sound, but with truth. In kitchens. In prisons. In ruined temples and dry riverbeds. In orbit. In exile. In mourning. The Empire heard it too. And for the first time in its reign, it did not answer. It listened. The pulse would not be remembered. It was remembrance. And now it lived. We go forward now, Cora whispered. And the Serfold moved, not by thrusters, but by memory.